If you've ever believed that fate hides in the most ordinary places, like the quiet seat beside you on a train, then you'll understand what I mean. And if you think some ghosts should stay buried in snow and silence, go ahead. Like, subscribe, and keep listening, because what happened that night still echoes in the cold parts of me that never thought. The snow had already started when I boarded the Midnight Express, wind howling through the station's iron ridge like a warning. The platform was nearly empty, just a few travelers hunched against the cold, and guards sweeping the crowd with those sharp, searching eyes I'd come to dread. My forged ticket was damp from sweat. Elara Van, it read, but that wasn't my name. I stepped aboard before courage could change its mind. Inside, the train glowed with amber light and the low hum of the engine. The scent of old velvet and coal lingered in the air. I found my seat by the window, pressed my forehead against the glass, and watched the city fade into white. For the first time in days, I let myself breathe until someone slid into the seat beside me. He didn't ask permission. He didn't need to. Even before I looked up, I felt it. The air around him shifted, heavier somehow, as if gravity itself leaned his way. He wore a black coat that caught the light like wet ink, and his skin was too pale, almost luminous. When he met my gaze, the world seemed to still. His eyes were a strange, impossible shade, like dusk and blood mixed together. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The rhythm of the wheels against the tracks filled the silence. But when the lamps flickered and the carriage dipped into darkness, I thought I saw his eyes glow faintly red. By the time the light returned, the color was gone, and I told myself it was nothing, just exhaustion and fear playing tricks. At the next stop, soldiers boarded. Their boots struck the floor like gunshots. Papers, one barked. Passengers fumbled nervously. I reached for my ID, pulse hammering. Then the man beside me touched my wrist, lightly, deliberately. "Stay still," he murmured. His voice was low, old, carrying something that didn't belong to this century. The guards moved past without even glancing at us, their faces slack, eyes glassy, as if we weren't there at all. When they left, I stared at him in disbelief. "You're running," he said softly. My throat tightened. "Aren't we all?" He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Some of us have been running longer than you can imagine." Outside, lightning flashed across the snow, painting his reflection in the glass. And for an instant, I saw it again, not a man, but something ancient, terrible, and beautiful. Then the train lurched, metal screaming. The lamps went out completely. In the dark, his voice came from beside me, calm and cold. "Stay close. They've found you." "Who?" I whispered. "The ones who burned your past," he said. "And they won't stop until they finish the job." And just like that, the illusion of safety vanished, along with any doubt that the stranger beside me was something far more dangerous than the storm outside. When the lights flickered back to life, it wasn't relief that filled the air, it was fear. The train had stopped somewhere deep in the mountains, snow piling high against its sides, sealing us in like a tomb. The crew moved from car to car, whispering about an avalanche blocking the tracks, but I knew better. The man beside me, Lucien, as he finally introduced himself, watched the storm with the stillness of a predator listening to distant heartbeats. His calm was raw, unnatural. The air around him felt heavier, colder, as though the blizzard bent itself to his will. Hours crawled by before the conductor announced we'd be sheltering overnight in an abandoned mining town a few miles ahead. Passengers murmured in disbelief, but the guards insisted, herding us out into the storm in small groups. Lucien walked beside me, unbothered by the wind that burned my face raw. When I stumbled, his hand caught my arm, firm, unloved, and impossibly warm. The contact startled me. I'd expected ice. Instead, his touch felt like fire barely contained, restrained only by his will. I pulled away, pretending not to notice that where he'd touched me, my skin now pulsed faintly like it remembered him. The town appeared through the veil of snow, a cluster of old wooden buildings half buried in drifts. The signs were unreadable, the windows shattered. Inside the largest structure, the old miner's hall, lanterns flickered weakly as people huddled close for warmth. The storm screamed outside, swallowing the world whole. I sat apart, near a broken window, tracing the condensation with my fingertip, wondering how long before the guards realized who I was. Lucien sat nearby, silent as ever, his eyes reflecting the candlelight like polished garnet. "You're not afraid," he said suddenly. "I've run out of fear." I lied. He tilted his head, studying me with that same unnerving intensity. "No, you've simply learned to wear it differently." I wanted to ask what he meant, but the words died when I saw the cut on his wrist, a clean, shallow line that gleamed silver before sealing itself shut. No blood, just skin knitting together like time reversed. My breath caught. He noticed, of course. "You've already guessed," he murmured. "Say it." I shook my head. "No, but I already knew." The unnatural grace, the eyes that burned in the dark, the soldiers who'd looked straight through him. All the signs were there. I couldn't finish. "Old," he said simply, almost kindly. "Older than this mountain. Older than the trains that dare cross it." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that curled around my spine. "And you, the Elara Van, or whatever your true name is, you're being hunted for reasons even you don't yet understand." The room seemed to shrink around us, the noise fading until there was only his voice and the storm's howl. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small pendant, a dark crystal etched with strange runes. "This was found in the ruins of your village. Do you recognize it?" My throat closed. I did. My mother had worn one just like it before the night everything burned. "Where did you get that?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the window, where the snow swirled in unnatural spirals, forming patterns like sigils in the wind. "Because you're tied to something older than your enemies, older than me," he said softly. "They aren't chasing you for what you've done. They're chasing you for what you are." Before I could demand an explanation, a scream cut through the hall. One of the guards lay on the floor, his throat torn open, not by a blade, but by something with claws. The lanterns flickered violently as the temperature dropped. Panic spread, people scattering in terror. Lucien rose to his feet, his movements too fast, too fluid. His eyes burned crimson now, fully revealed, no pretense left. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice deep and commanding, the tone of someone who expected obedience. Shadows twisted around him like living smoke. The storm outside answered his call with a roar that shook the walls. A figure burst through the broken door, a man in black armor marked with the same sigil that had branded my life in ashes. The mark of the Inquisitors. My past had found me. Lucien moved before the intruder could raise his weapon. One heartbeat he stood beside me. The next he was upon the man, his hand piercing through armor and bone with effortless strength. The guard dropped, lifeless. Lucien turned back to me, blood glistening like rubies on his hand. "This is no coincidence," he said, voice low and furious. "They knew you'd be here. They've been waiting for both of us." I stared at him, trembling, half in horror, half in recognition of something I didn't want to name. "Why me?" He wiped his hand clean on the dead man's cloak. "Because your blood," he said slowly, "is the last key to the throne they stole from me." The wind screamed through the shattered door, and for the first time, I understood what kind of storm I'd truly stepped into. The storm never stopped, it only changed shape. By dawn, the blizzard had thinned into a ghostly mist curling through the abandoned town, swallowing sound and breath alike. We'd barricaded ourselves in the mining hall, but Lucien said it wouldn't matter. "They'll come at sunrise," he murmured, pacing by the dying fire. "They'll want to see what bleeds in daylight." I watched him, the so-called vampire king, moving with a predator's quiet grace, his shadow flickering across the frost-bitten walls. He'd told me fragments through the night, how he'd once ruled a hidden kingdom beneath these mountains, how he'd refused to enslave humans and was betrayed by his own council. But it wasn't until I saw the symbol carved into the dead Inquisitor's armor, a twisted crown entwined with thorns, that I realized the hunters chasing me weren't human fanatics. They were his kind, vampires, loyal to the usurper who'd stolen his throne. I sat near the fire, turning the pendant he'd given me over and over in my hands. "You said my blood is the key. What does that mean?" I asked finally. Lucien stopped pacing. The firelight caught his eyes, making them glow like molten metal. "Because once, long ago, a human queen made peace with our kind," he said. "She offered her blood to bind the realms, human and vampire. It sealed the vow that neither race would destroy the other. You carry her bloodline, Elara. The oath lives in you." I shook my head, laughing bitterly. "That's impossible. I'm just running," he finished gently. always running from what you can't remember. He stepped closer, the faint scent of winter and iron clinging to him. But they haven't forgotten who you are, and neither have I. Before I could respond, a tremor rippled through the floorboards. The sound of boots, dozens of them, crunching through snow. Then the crash of the door being kicked in. The hall filled with cold daylight as armored figures stormed in, pale, graceful, and terrible. Lucian moved like lightning, a blur of steel and shadow, but there were too many. I saw the glint of silver-tipped weapons, heard the hiss of ancient words as they chanted a spell that made the very air tighten. One of the soldiers seized me, dragging me toward the door. "The girl bleeds first," he snarled. Lucian's roar wasn't human. He tore through the attackers with a ferocity that shook the rafters, but every wound he inflicted seemed to cost him. He faltered, sinking to one knee as his enemies circled. I fought the soldier's grip, reaching for the pendant, remembering his words. "Your blood is the key." My fingers found the shard's edge. Without thinking, I cut my palm and pressed the blood to the crystal. The world ignited. Light burst from the pendant, pure and crimson, spilling across the hall in ribbons that wrapped around Lucian like threads of fire. His head snapped up, eyes blazing brighter than I'd ever seen. The chains binding him shattered. The soldiers screamed as the light tore through them, dissolving armor and shadow alike. And through it all, Lucian rose, his power fully awakened, terrible and magnificent. When the light faded, the hall was silent. Snow drifted through the broken roof like falling ash. Lucian stood at the center, the last embers of that red glow still pulsing beneath his skin. I was on my knees, trembling, the pendant cracked and smoking in my hand. He came to me then, kneeling as if I were the one who'd saved him. "It's over," I whispered. "For now," he said. His voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "You've broken the curse that bound our worlds. They'll rebuild, but not as before." He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from my face. "Your blood has done what kings could not." I wanted to ask what would happen next, but the look in his eyes already told me. He couldn't stay. The dawn light crept across the floor, touching his boots, and smoke rose faintly from the hem of his coat. "You'll burn," I said, panicked. He smiled, a real, human smile. "No, I'll rest." He pressed the pendant into my hand, the cracked crystal now cool and dull. "Keep this. When the world remembers us wrongly, remind them what we truly were." And then he was gone, vanishing into the snow, leaving only the echo of his footsteps and the faint scent of winter roses. Weeks later, when I reached the next city, people spoke of the storm that devoured a train and the mysterious stranger who saved its passengers. No one believed me when I said he was real. But sometimes, in the reflection of train windows at night, I catch a glimpse of crimson eyes watching from the glass. And I know the Vampire King still keeps watch over his kingdom of ghosts.